In today's video, we're looking at one of the most hyped wide receivers in this class, Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. What are his strengths and weaknesses? Where do we think he's utilized at the next level? What's his draft capital going to look like? And most importantly, how's he going to do for us in fantasy? Watch the end of this video, and you should have a good idea. So as far as Golden's height and weight are concerned, he's give or take 6 foot tall, 195 pounds. He is 21 at the moment and should be 22 by the end of his rookie season in the NFL. Now, looking at his production, it's kind of an interesting profile. So he spent his first 2 seasons at Houston with kind of similar production. So as a freshman, 584 yards and 7 touchdowns is impressive for a true freshman. So that is good. But he kind of reduced his stat line a little bit as a sophomore year, 419 yards and 6 touchdowns. As you can see, the grades 65.3 and 68.4 for these seasons aren't necessarily good at all. But then you get to his junior season where he transferred to Texas. I guess he was transferring looking for more playing time, more production, and he definitely got that. He got 987 yards and 9 touchdowns. This is including his college football playoff games as well. So his stats are a little inflated because of that, but you can see his grades this year were better than any other year. So looking at some advanced stats here, I looked at every draft eligible FBS wide receiver with at least 50 targets in 2024, which was good for 143 players in the sample size. So we saw that Golden ran 494 routes, which was 94.9% of the team's routes. I found this kind of interesting because he didn't really have that much production going down the stretch until, the college football playoffs. So that's a lot of routes, and that didn't really translate into a lot of production. Now, you'll see that with the PFF grades down here. PFF doesn't really like this guy as much as, some other players. But moving on to his slot snap percentage and out wide snap percentage, you'll see that he was in out wide 76.1% of the time and in the slot 23.9% of the time. So he is versatile. That is something that we really do like. We don't like him being this linear vertical X or Z receiver. We'd like him to be as versatile as possible, so he can end up on an NFL team in multiple different roles, right? So moving on to his yards per route run, his 2.10 was tied for 52nd in the class. Like I said, he wasn't very productive this year. He just had a lot of games, which kind of inflated his stats a little bit. And then his PFF receiving grade, 75.6, was 43rd. So as you can see, not very high on this guy, right? Yak per reception, 5.2 was tied for 76 in the sample size, which I found kind of odd. On film, he's really dynamic with the ball in his hands, so it kind of surprised me that his yak was this low. I know he's kind of a deep threat from time to time, so that might be hurting his yak per reception numbers. As far as his missed tackles forced, 8 was tied for 69th in the sample size. He's, less than 200 pounds, 6 foot tall. So he's not super physical, and he's not as elusive as I would like. He's good after the catch, but because of his speed, really, if he gets an open space, he's ridiculous after the catch. But as far as elusiveness is concerned, he's not that great. So I'm not surprised by that number. Now, his contested catch percentage, 60.7, very good. Like we say, 50 to 55% is where we want the threshold to be for your jump ball receiver. And 60.7 is 5 points over that, so that's really good. And he had multiple opportunities, right? 28 opportunities in contested catch situations, brought down 17 of them, so that's awesome. Now, as far as his targets and receptions per game, 5.18 per game is pretty solid. That's not a lot of volume. Now, I will say Quinn Ewers did not help that at all. And, the QB play wasn't that great at Texas outside of when Arch Manning was on the field. We'll do the Quinn Ewers video at some point, just so you know we're not super high on him. And then compare that to the receptions per game, 3.62. That's good because That means he brought in the majority of his targets, so that is good. But as you can see, the volume is not there for him. I know he had 987 yards. Just not good production considering he played in, I think, 12 games. So, as far as his yards, we said 987. That was 61.68 a game. It's not great. And then the 9 touchdowns was 0.56 per game. So, if you look at the stats, you see 987 yards and 9 touchdowns, you're going to be like, yeah, that's really good production. You got to look at how many games he played and look at each game log to see exactly what he's doing per game. All right, moving on to some more advanced stats, specifically him versus man and zone coverages. So you see his PFF grade versus man was 65.2, which was tied for 146 in the sample size. And his yards per route run versus man was 0.92, tied for 237th in the sample size. So I had to go even farther down the list of prospects to see where he actually ranked. He's way down there, by far the worst in the class. So why is that? I think it's mainly because he just didn't have a lot of production per game. I don't know how they exactly calculate the PFF grade part, but like we said, he had a lot of games and just didn't really produce a lot. So you can see where that's just not great numbers for sure, right? Now, as far as his PFF grade versus zones considered, 74.8, 41st in the sample size, I consider that to be okay, right? It's definitely, your average threshold. So he's not great or bad versus zone. I think he's solid in finding holes in the zone. But I think the Texas offense really does not play to any wide receiver's strengths. It's basically just bubble screens, quick passes, run, quick passes. That's just how the Sark offense is. It's not fun to watch. Moving on to his yards per route run versus zone, 2.51 was 48th in the sample size. So nothing that's sticking out in terms of advanced stats here. PFF grade on screens was 227th. His PFF grade in the slot was 84th. He did have a decent amount of targets in the slot too, so that's concerning. And then his first downs caught was tied for 27th in the sample size. So if you look at PFF, this guy is one of the worst receivers in the class. I don't necessarily share that opinion. I do think he's not worthy of a first-round pick. I'm seeing a lot of people saying he's going to be a first-round pick just because of his speed and his after-the-catch ability. I don't necessarily believe that, but, everyone's entitled to their opinion for sure. All right, time for my favorite part of the video. So, quick recap. Matthew Golden's a wide receiver out of Texas. He's give or take 6 foot tall, 195 pounds, and is a junior, a true junior, which means he's pretty young, so that's good in terms of dynasty perspective. As far as our valuation of him, we think he's worthy of a late second-round pick. We know he's probably going to go in that 25 to 30 range in the NFL draft, so we've seen him mocked to the Texans, the Commanders, and even the Bills. So he's going to be drafted pretty highly, which doesn't hurt his profile by any means. Now, as far as his high comp's concerned, we gave him Terry McLaurin. Both very similar players in terms of profile. So they're both really explosive players, especially downfield. And especially when they get into open space, they're able to blitz by defenders and usually score. So I saw a lot of similarities there, so that's where the comp comes from. Now, as far as a low comp for him, we gave him Zay Jones, another guy that was drafted relatively highly, but hasn't really had the long peaks that Terry McLaurin has had. So we think that's his floor. Now, as far as an official grade's concerned, we gave him a 77.5 out of 100, which is good for a good prospect. Now, in terms of his short routes, we gave him a 3.5 out of 5. Like we showed earlier, his screen production was pretty bad, so he's not really good on these screens and hitches and things like that. He just wasn't good at breaking the tackles after the catch, and that is kind of attributed to the Sark offense. Like we said, the Texas offense, in my opinion, is not very kind to their receivers. Moving on to his medium routes, we gave him a 4 out of 5. When he's able to get his explosiveness going, and especially on these dig routes, these comebacks and things like that, his slants, when he's able to get into open space and gain separation due to his explosiveness, that's where we think he's the best. Now, he lacks the nuances in route running. He's not an Emeka Egbuka by any means as far as the nuance goes, but he usually relies on his explosiveness to get open. So when he does that, he's gaining separation very, very consistently. Now, as far as his deep routes are concerned, we gave him a 4 out of 5. We think he's probably best at deep routes, right? He's consistently getting open on these go routes with his outside releases, crossing face on these post routes, things like that. Now, whether or not Quinn Ewers hits the deep ball is a question in and of itself, but we thought the deep route running was pretty consistent. Again, not very nuanced, but explosive nonetheless. Now, as far as his double moves go, we gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's not a technician when it comes to route running, honestly, but we did see him use some double moves from time to time, some head fakes here and there, but it wasn't very consistent, but they did work when he did use them. Moving on to his releases, his 3.5 out of 5. He can get separation off the line from time to time, especially with his outside release. He's really explosive and quick to get off the line, so that's where that grade comes from. Now, as far as his speed goes, he's a low 4.3, guys, from what I'm being told. His football speed's a little bit slower than his 40 time, in my opinion, but not a big enough jump to be concerned about it. As far as acceleration, though, his acceleration is almost elite, in my opinion. We gave him a 9 out of 10 for that. He's super, super quick to accelerate. He's quick to get off the line. And whenever he gets into open space, that's when he's really dangerous. Kind of similar to Terry McLaurin, right? We saw him multiple times. When he gets out in open space, he just scores. He just outruns everybody. Matthew Golden's the same way. Now, as far as his deceleration is concerned, this is kind of where his short route grade came from. We gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's not really good at stopping and going real quick. So, his out and up, I don't think we saw any of those. His snap down on these hitches and things like that aren't particularly fast from what we saw. So that kind of hurt his short route grade, right? These two kind of play into each other. Now, his agility, though, his agility in open space was pretty solid. We gave him a 4 out of 5. He's able to make people miss in open field a lot. So that's good. We do like, he's not great after the catch, and he didn't have that many situations where he had to use his yak ability, but when he did, it was pretty solid. Now, his change of direction, this is where the Terry McLaurin comp comes up again. Once he gets the ball in his hands, he can explode upfield at whatever angle he'd like to maximize his chance of scoring. He's a home run hitter for sure. So that's where we get the 4 out of 5 grade from, right? Now, as far as his catching's concerned, we give him a 4.5 out of 5. We're not worried about his catching at the next level at all. He doesn't have that many drops. He's able to make some contested catches. Like you saw, it was 60.7, I believe, percent contested catch percentage. That's really good. So we have no worries there. As far as his catch and traffic grade, also 4.5. Really good at the catch point. He's not super oversized. He's, kind of average size for your receiver position. But he's physical, man. He really can go up and get the ball when needed. He's able to catch it in these tight windows, things of that nature. So that's really good. Now, his run after catch ability, 4 out of 5. This guy's good with the ball in his hands. Now, he's not super wiggly, right? But whenever he gets into open space, he scores, right? So that's awesome. Now, in terms of his dog factor, he's not as prone to inviting physical contact and things like that. He's not trying to get hit that much, which is smart in some instances. So we did knock his dog factor a little bit there. So we gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's making business decisions a lot. So, there's that. Can't knock him for that. Now, as far as his analytics go, 4.5 out of 10. He hasn't had that good of production, honestly. And even when he did have good production this year, his production was super inflated because of the amount of games. So, and you see the analytics from PFF as well are not very good at all. So a little below average there. Now, as far as projected draft capital goes, we gave him a 4.5 out of 5. He could slip into the second round. I doubt it. He's probably going to be a late first round pick. So that's where that grade comes from. And then one of the more important grades, in my opinion, is the XZ slot ability. He's very versatile, so he's going to be in that 4.5 to 5 range. We gave him more so the 4.5 out of 5 instead of the 5, just because he's not as dynamic in the slot. But as the X and Z positions, we definitely see him carving out a role on most teams at the X or Z positions, with about, a 15 to 20% role in the slot. So that's really good. That means he's versatile, and the majority of teams will have some sort of role for him. Now, our worries and limitations, a lot of his production, especially his touchdowns, were caused by blown coverage just because the teams that they were playing against just didn't expect him to go deep for some reason, and he was just wide open in the end zone for at least 4 of his 9 touchdowns this year. So there is that. The route running as well, I didn't put that on here, but the route running is kind of raw for me. He is a junior, so he doesn't have that much experience. So that's also a slight concern. But overall, Matthew Golden has a lot of upside. He's a little more raw of a prospect than I would want in the first round. But, he checks all the boxes in being an explosive, dynamic deep threat. So, how does Matthew Golden stack up with the rest of the 2025 class? Well, we currently have him as our wide receiver 9. Technically, probably our wide receiver 8, because we don't think Travis Hunter is going to be playing much wide receiver. And he doesn't really count as far as being a wide receiver prospect at this moment, because from everything I'm being told, he's going to be a cornerback. But he kind of fell a little bit short of what we were expecting in terms of his grade. He's below Isaiah Bond, Jack Bech, Mika Egbuka, and Tez Johnson in that really good tier of wide receivers. He's still a good prospect, but in a tier of his own with the Kyle Williamses of the world. And he's definitely not an elite prospect in terms of Jalen Royals, Luther Burden, and Tet McMillan, who we think are our big 3 of the class. Jalen Royals being a little bit underrated. So, we still think he's going to be a good player if he cleans up his route running and adds a little bit of technicality there. But as far as him being a deep threat, we don't really like that profile as much in terms of fantasy production. We do think he's going to be a big boom or bust type of receiver if he hits. Not really as much consistency as Terry McLaurin is. So that's where we come up with our grade here. Last but not least, we want to give a special shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. So thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mazjack, and Infamy MTG for supporting the channel. We really do appreciate it. Now, if you want to become a Patreon member yourself, you'll gain access to a lot of really cool things, including a private Discord server where we talk about real life football and fantasy football, private live streams. We'll probably be doing one on the NFL draft, so that'll be really cool. We do custom videos as well per request. We've already done one on Isaac Guerendo, and we're looking forward to doing a lot more of those. And also, you'll gain early access to all videos as well, usually a few days in advance. If you're enjoying the content, please like, comment, and even subscribe. It helps us out with the algorithm a lot. And, we really do enjoy making this content for you guys. And last but not least, thank you guys for watching.